Anxiety. Okay.
Okay. Welcome everybody to Tanya for Daily Living. We haven't spoken in a while. It's been, I think, 3 weeks. So happy everyone's here. I'm happy to be here. It's so special to make Tanya a real part of our lives. So I'm going to do a real quick summary, diving into a little bit of last time when we spoke, what we had spoken about, and then see if we can move ahead into Perek Vav, chapter 6 of the Tanya. So what have we spoken about up until now? We are speaking about the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe's magnum opus. This is his Hasidic Sefer on how to live a Jewish lifestyle according to Hasidus and according to Kabbalah. And he very humbly says that this is all based on his forebears, on the things that he has learned from others. And really, there is a lot of novelty and unique contribution on the part of the Alter Rebbe himself, of course, as well. And we will see it throughout. So the Alter Rebbe right away begins with understanding if you want to know how to serve Hashem and have a connection with God, then you have to actually understand yourself first, because you can't start connecting if you don't even know who you are and what's happening. So the Alter Rebbe explains that you have two operating systems in your body. You have the Nefesh Elokis and you have the Nefesh Bahamis. The Nefesh Elokis is one soul. The Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul, is a different soul. And both of those are, again, different operating systems. The Nefesh Bahamis is selfish. He serves himself. He's also short-sighted. He doesn't see beyond himself. He's kind of simple. Whatever he sees is what he gets. That's what he registers. And there's also this other characteristic, which is that he's constantly in a state of anxiety. He's very scared. He's filled with fear, always trying to protect himself. That's the Nefesh Bahamis. The Nefesh Elokis is the exact opposite. The Nefesh Elokis is one who sees beyond himself. So he's altruistic. He's also not short-sighted. He's deep. He plummets the depths of whatever it is that's looking at him. He tries to understand more. And that's why he's able to see God. He's not short-sighted and only sees himself. He's able to see godliness because he wants to see what's beyond. And the last characteristic, the exact opposite, is that he doesn't experience anxiety. Instead, he experiences the very opposite, a deep inner sense of calm, real calm, because he doesn't feel like I have to protect myself. I'm afraid what's going to happen, kind of like an animal who's basically functioning off of instincts and what's happening in their exact experience. Instead, the Nefesh Elokis is experiencing a godly level of seeing the world, right? So the Nefesh Elokis is in a sphere of deeply seeing and understanding that everything is God. God runs the world. Nothing should throw me off because I'm always being held by him. And you have two absolutely conflicting operating systems in you at every given point. And what we spoke about from the beginning is, first of all, two different points that I like to stress over here, which is if you're experiencing a sense of anxiety, that's very normal because that's the way we were born. To be in a state of anxiety because that's what the Nefesh Bahamis experiences. And you also have a different sphere that you could kind of slide into if you were to choose, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, which is a sense of calm, the Nefesh Bahamis' point of view, which is a godly perspective. The other piece that I want to just say is if you're feeling unsettled sometimes, that's natural too, because you have two operating systems constantly and you're constantly trying to figure out where you're coming from and who you are and how you want to look at the world. And there's a sense of not feeling grounded. That's because of the fact that we are born with two separate systems that are constantly vying for our attention. And so it's a very human experience to feel anxious and to feel ungrounded. And hopefully through understanding what the Alter Rebbe wants from us and connecting to Hashem and how we could come back to the spirit, maybe more of the Nefesh Elokis, we'll be able to ground ourselves a little bit more and shift away from the anxiety that we're constantly feeling. So let's continue. So then the Alter Rebbe goes into 3 chapters talking about the Nefesh Elokis, and he talks about what the Nefesh Elokis is, what's its makeup. Its makeup is 10 different spheres, and we spoke about how they have 3 intellectual spheres and 7 emotive spheres, and how all of those are expressions of God, and also the way that we express ourselves and the way that we connect to Hashem, because we use our levushim, our garments, our thought, speech, and action to engage our neshama with God. How do we do that? Through Torah and mitzvahs. And that was the last thing that we spoke about, that Torah and mitzvahs are basically like the us as a gift. And he says, if you want to connect with me, here's the way that you can do it. This is the way that I can connect with you. If you want, you can go and do any random thing for Hashem, but Hashem says this is the way that the true experience happens, because if you learn Torah and you engage in mitzvahs, what you're doing is you're taking your levushim and you are giving the king a hug, which is the example that the Alter Rebbe says. When you give the king a hug, even though your hands are surrounding his garments, you're still holding him. You're holding the actual king. And at the same time, right, he uses that concept of levushim, garments. The reason why he uses them is bifold, is for 2 reasons. Because not only are you encompassing the king, but the king also encompasses you, meaning a garment encompasses something, and it also is encompassed by, right? So when we engage in Torah and mitzvahs, Hashem is also enveloping us with his light. He is enveloping us with his presence, with his connection, with his truth. And that's why the Alter Rebbe stresses in Perek the importance of, even more than mitzvahs, Torah study, because Torah study is one with God. It's Hashem's wisdom. And if we engage in Torah study, we're literally, and he gives the example of like eating, it's like eating godliness, or when you're eating food, it becomes part of you. Literally, it becomes part of your blood vessels, like your makeup is the food that you eat. You are what you eat. And in the same way, Torah, when you engage in Torah study, it becomes you. And that means that you are connecting to Hashem and really filling yourself with Hashem's presence, Hashem's light, in a way that is not necessarily so with other modes of serving Hashem. Torah is a step above, let's say, mitzvahs or other ways of engaging with Hashem, let's say the tefillah, because it's you literally ingesting Hashem. Okay, and that level of unification is very, very deep. So here we come to Perek Vav. Any questions so far? And then let's see what happens in Perek Vav. So Perek Vav, the Alter Rebbe begins talking about something very different. So up until now, we've been in this really safe, beautiful bubble of talking about the Nefesh Elokis and talking about it also in the realm of theory. Like, what does the Nefesh Elokis look like? How does he function? How beautiful is that? How can we connect to God? So far, it's been really beautiful, very theoretical. Now we're starting to get down and dirty, because now the Alter Rebbe starts Perek Vav saying Zel Umazeh, which means this world reflects the next world. The worlds reflect one another. It is a mirror. And that mirroring quality happens throughout the entire world, in the natural world. And here the Alter Rebbe is referring to this concept to directly talk about the fact that the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Bahamis have this mirroring quality to them, which means that anything that we've been talking about up until now about the Nefesh Elokis, the Nefesh Bahamis has those things as well, to the opposite, right? So the Nefesh Bahamis also has 10 faculties, also has 10 different expressions. The Nefesh Bahamis also has Chachma Bina Das, Netzach Eidusai Malchus, right? It also has Chesed Gvura Tiferes, Netzach Eidusai Malchus. It also has 10 different ways of expressing itself. The Nefesh Bahamis also, Zelu Maseh, also has 3 levushim, thought, speech, and action. How does the Nefesh Bahamis engage with the world? That's going to look very different than the way the Nefesh Elokis engages with the world. And the reason for that is, and the Alter Rebbe begins Perek Vav with explaining that the source of the Nefesh Bahamis and the source of the Nefesh Elokis are very different. And because of that, everything filters down from a different space, and your actions whether they're coming from the Nefesh Elokis, the Nefesh Bahamis, are going to be different based on where it's coming from, right? So I could be speaking, I'm speaking to you now, and if I'm speaking from a space of the Nefesh Elokis, the same exact words that I'm saying are either elevating me and making me a godly human being, or I could be speaking and engaging with you in a different way, but it's coming from that other operating system, the Nefesh Bahamis, and not just am I operating from that space, the words that I'm saying and the person that I'm becoming when I'm engaging with you in speech means that I'm an entirely different person. I'm accessing and I'm enveloping myself with something entirely different. What is that thing? Where does the Nefesh Bahamis come from? So the Alter Rebbe explains the Nefesh Bahamis comes from the realm of Klipa. And in the beginning, I don't know if everyone here was at the first class, we spoke about the concept of Klipa. What is Klipa? So Klipa, just literally, according to the Hebrew definition, means shell. And in that first class, we spoke about what is a shell. A shell means that there's a covering. And in ways, a covering is a wonderful thing, right? A cover, like for example, an orange has a shell. Why is it there? It's in order to protect the fruit, that the fruit doesn't get damaged, that it retains its freshness, right? In ways, a shell is a wonderful thing. Here in this realm, a shell also has the capacity to cover up and conceal. And that's what klipa is. Klipa is something that it's concealing, it's covering up. What is it covering up? It's covering up godliness. So anything in this world that you see, which is going to be anything in this world, is covering godliness, which means that almost everything that you look at has a shell on it. It has a layer of something that's telling you that there is not a God in this world, that there's not a God enlivening this object, that there's not someone making this happen. And you could hear now, understanding that the Nefesh Bahamis' characteristics are short-sighted, right? Not plumbing the depths, not being able to see outside of itself. It makes sense that those characteristics are coming from that are in line with the Nefesh Bahamis because of its source, right? Its source is klipa. Its source is to cover up, to be a shell, to hide godliness. So it makes sense that the Nefesh Bahamis that comes from its source, which is klipa, would have these characteristics of being short-sighted. It doesn't need to go to the depths. It doesn't need to go deeper than what it sees. Okay? Now, what's important to understand about Sitra Achra and klipa? Sitra Achra means the other side. And the way the Alter Rebbe speaks about it in a different Perek is when he explains the other side. Of course, everything that is in this world, that is in our reality, comes from Hashem. Hashem is the ultimate creator, and there's nothing here that's not here because he doesn't want it to be here. He is creating it and sustaining it at every given moment. This we know. So what does it mean, Sitra Achra? What does it mean, Klipa? Things that are coming from the other side. Is there, God forbid, some other creator? No, Chas v'shalom, of course not. What it means is, and the Alter Rebbe gives a mashal here to kind of explain it, is when you give a present to someone, to a friend, to an enemy, to someone that you're not in the best of places with right now, and you give it to them begrudgingly. The way the Alter Rebbe talks about it is, you kind of give it to them like you throw it over your shoulder, like you just give it to them. Or like, let's say, for example, your child is begging you for something and begging, and finally you just give it to them. But it's not coming from a space of like, I love you and I deeply care and I want to grant this to you as a gift from my heart. It's like, fine, here. Right? So where is it coming from in God? It's coming from the other side. It's coming from a space of he doesn't really want to, desire to, coming from a space of connection. It's coming from the other side, that other part of him that is almost like a necessary evil. Why is there klipa? Why is there sitra achra? Why did Hashem create the world in that begrudging manner to sustain basically this whole entire world, but in that begrudging manner? Why is this realm of Hashem? And the answer is, it sounds funny, but it's for our sakes. It's for us. It's in order for us to be able to be in this world and fulfill our destiny, which is to choose God over evil, to have free choice. By us seeing appeal, seeing disconnect, not truly seeing God and still opting for Him, choosing to do the mitzvah, learning Torah, that means that we had a choice. If godliness was just absolutely clear, it was transient, we were able to see in a transparent way that everything is God, then we wouldn't have a choice. It would be our reality. There would be nothing else for us to acknowledge. But because Hashem creates the world from Sitra Achra, it actually, whether or not we want to be his nation. And the other aspect over there, the reason why Hashem creates a trachra, and it's in line with this, is because Hashem wants us to get and reap the reward from our choice. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have any schar for choosing Him. There would be no struggle. So why would we be granted a reward for doing anything? We would definitely be more robotic. There wouldn't be a free choice, so therefore there wouldn't be a reward because there would be no struggle. So the whole ultimate purpose of the world, which is to bring godliness down and to reveal Him, was put into place, right? It's kind of like circuitous. It was put into place because Hashem desired for it to be there. And so therefore He created a world that hides Him, that we have to peel away the layers in order to see Him. So let's talk about what that means, because if you hear that the entire world is just a peel, the entire world is Sitra Achra, everything is Sheker, everything is hiding the truth of what reality truly is, then what happens is you start thinking like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that everything I look at is Sitra Achra? Does that mean everything that I engage with is Klipa? And the Alter Rebbe says, yes, actually, this is true. And he explains why this is true. He explains that there are two different levels of klipa, two different types of shells. The first shell is called klipas nega. Klipas nega is the type of klipa that is considered neutral, according to the Alter Rebbe. It means, yes, it covers up God. Yes, it is a shell. And yes, it is something that doesn't allow you to see godliness. And at the same time, it's not sinful to engage with it, right? So it's neutral ground, sinful. It's not an avera, right? So let's say eating foods that are permissible. Technically, when you look at food and you're approaching the food, you're thinking, I need to eat this to sustain myself. I need to make sure that if I eat something, I will stay in existence. All that is that Nefesh Bahamas operating system, right? I need to eat in order to survive. That's animalistic. That's saying I'm the one who controls my world, and therefore I have to make sure to eat. It's not bad. It's just functioning from a space of peel, of layer, of shell, of klipa, where I'm the one who's in charge. This food is what is going to give me enough sustenance so that I can live. And that's all in the realm of being the person who sees klipa. I see the shell. I'm short-sighted right now. All I'm seeing is myself and the food and how to survive. As opposed to, let's say, engaging with food and express my gratitude towards Hashem for this food. I'm choosing food that is permissible to me, that Hashem told me specifically I should eat this food, and this food will elevate me and give me energy to do more mitzvahs, right? That's a totally different operating system, okay? Now, this klipa is not bad. It's just neutral. It's just living in this world where everything is covered over and you can't actually see God. The second level of klipa is called shalish klipas hatameis, which are the three levels of klipa, which are klipa that if you were to engage with them, they're a level of klipa that bring down your neshama. They're the forbidden shells, right? So imagine eating foods that are not permissible to you. That's stemming from a level of klipa that so hides over the godliness that it will actually affect you in a very deep way. That's engaging in non-permissible acts, non-permissible foods. And there's a very big difference between the two of those, right? If you're engaged with klipas nega, it's not actually harming you. As opposed to engaging with shalish klipas atmeis, it will affect you in a very deep way. Let's go into that and a little bit more. But first, we want to talk a little bit about what is kedusha, because we're talking about sitra achar. We now understand that there's this other part of the way Hashem sustains the world, and it's basically the way that the sustenance that we see and are very familiar with, right? This is the world that we live in. So we see everything around us and we see a lot of the show. That is our experience. What's Kedusha? Like, what is the operating system of the Nefesh Elokis actually seeing? What does that world look like? So the Alter Rebbe says here, Vitzara Kedusha, Einei Ela Hashra V'Amshacha Mekdusha Seishal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, Kedusha is when you could see his light manifest. When you see God's light manifest, that is considered Kedusha. Now, most of us are not actually seeing Hashem's light manifest all the time, but we know the idea that, of course, this whole world is sustained by Hashem's light. Everything exists because Hashem is making it exist. So how do I really see Kedusha, but I can't see Kedusha? How do we get into this framework of getting into that operating system of the Nefesh Elokis as opposed to the Nefesh Bahamis, which is what our fleshly eyes actually see? So the Alter Rebbe says, very simple. Ve'ena Kadosh Baruch Hu sheira ela al dvar shebatel atzlai yisbarach. And he brings in basically this bomb, right? This if there is something that is surrendering itself to godliness, that's how you're able to get into that mode of really seeing God's light manifest. Really, you can never really see his light, because how can you get into that operating system? It's not something that our eyes can see. Maybe we could intellectually understand it if we contemplate and contemplate and contemplate. Maybe we could start seeing Hashem's miracle happening in front of our eyes, but that's not the way that we usually see the world. So how do we get into that mindset? The Alter Rebbe gives us this incredible concept called bittul, surrender. And what that means is anytime you'll see something that is surrendering itself to godly light, you'll see almost like an opening, like a window into Hashem's reality, a window into the Nefesh Elokis' reality. So the Alter Rebbe gives an example of, for example, when a person engages in the concept of self-sacrifice, right? So he gives this really extreme example of Hashem Yishmar, but in our any is a year switch between choosing give up their faith or give up their life. According to the Nefesh Bahamis, you do everything you can to make sure that you stay alive, right? Everything is about self-preservation. Everything is about myself and where I am right now and taking care of myself so I don't feel too much anxiety. And we see that Yidden have this incredible ability to shift into something. How is that even possible that a person who's in this operating system of how possible to give up existing in order to not give up their faith? And basically bring here this, and he's going to talk about it throughout the Tanya, the concept of bittul, where if you can surrender and push aside yourself, what the Nefesh Bahamis wants, if you could tap into, instead of your selfish state of mind, tap into something else, whatever that is, hopefully it's godly's, Hashem's ratzon, that's what we're talking about here, then you're surrendering your selfish motives for him. And that ability to do something like that means that you're coming out of the Nefesh Bahamis cycle and you're touching upon that other operating system. And it's almost like bittul is the segue to help you get into that framework, that mind frame of looking at the world from a Nefesh Elokis perspective, from that operating system. So bittul is an incredible technique because it's bringing you to a different space. Now, oftentimes people think of surrender and they look at it as weakness, right? They'll look at surrender and they'll say, I feel less than, or it makes me feel weak, right? It's a weakness. Like think of the concept of like an army, right? The stronger army is vanquishing the weaker army. The weaker army surrendered itself to the stronger army. And that's not really what the word surrender actually means. In fact, surrender means, especially when it comes to the concept of human beings approaching God and surrendering ourselves to God, it's actually, instead of it being a weakness, it's an incredible embracing of the greatness of Hashem and Hashem's truth. So instead of being in an operating system of, I see whatever I see and I have to survive, and basically constantly living in a state of lying, because what you see is not really the truth. The real truth that we intellectually understand is God. So instead of being in that space of kind of me and small-minded and just what I see in front of me, which is in ways alma de shikra, right? A world of lies. If I can get myself into a different space, I'm pushing myself aside, which is a lying reality, into a more truth-based reality. And that's not weakness. In fact, that takes a lot of strength and courage to be able to push yourself even a little bit aside to embrace truth, right? Truth is not always comfortable, but it's true, it's real. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the Perek. So any questions before we continue into a little bit more what that means? Love. Okay. So what does that look like? What does that mean? How do we actually do something like that? How's that even possible? So the Alter Rebbe says something that I thought was very beautiful. You hear this concept all the time, but to me, for some reason, it clicked. He says that a person who engages in Torah study, and here we don't necessarily mean just in Torah study, we mean surrendering yourself, pushing yourself aside and doing something that Hashem commanded, Shechina Shruya love. The Shechina rests upon him, which means, and I don't, I grew up as a firm person, and you hear these things, and you hear that Hashem's presence rests on a quorum, on a minion of men, and you think, okay, fine, that's a beautiful idea. But when you actually think about the concept that the Shekhinah is resting on a person who engages in Torah study, right? Imagine we're sitting right now, we're learning Torah, which means that the Shekhinah himself, Hashem himself, is resting upon you, means that you are being enveloped in his light, which means that in this moment, when you can be thinking about lots of other things, you can be looking at the physical around you, world around you, sitting in this physical space, seeing the physical people around you, and instead of engaging in that operating system, you're pushing that aside and you're thinking about Hashem's Torah. He is engaging with you and connecting with you and resting upon you. And that has an actual effect on you, right? He is giving you that hug. He's engaging with you. It is actually his manifestation of his inner light happening in your experience. That is what we were talking about before. That is Kedusha. So throughout our day, we're normally engaged with Sitra Achra. We're normally engaged with the Klipa, our Klipa experience, which is the shell and the day-to-day and everything that goes into our busy lives. But the moment that we're able to separate ourselves from that and kind of veer away from that, even just for a moment, we're able to immediately, because we have the Nefesh Elokis, come into that other framework, which is that godly reality. That is engaging with, in that moment, you're engaging with Kedusha. Not just like a part of Kedusha, like, oh, I'm a little holier now. You're embracing the entire Shekhinah in that moment. So what's so powerful is, and this is a beautiful gift, what we're kind of easing up to is, last time we spoke, we were talking about how the levushim, the garments of our soul, in ways are greater and holier than the actual soul itself. Why? Because the soul is a piece of God. The garment can bring the soul to an even holier place by engaging with Torah and mitzvahs, right? Now look at the three garments of the Nefesh Bahamis. They also have, right? The Nefesh Bahamis also has those three garments. It also has a very powerful impact. What can those three garments do? When those three garments are engaged with Shalosh Klipas Hatameis, obviously it's bringing down the neshama to a lower place than it ever had been, right? It has the potential to really drag down the Nefesh Bahamis. But if the soul, which is what we're normally doing, is just engaging with Klipas Nega, just the neutral ground, nothing's really happening. It's not like it's dragging it down. It's just not engaging with Kedusha, with the absolute unity of God. So what happens is our levushim are basically the gateway through which we can either access just neutrality of just experiencing shell, or it could give us not just the opposite, which would be like just beautiful connection. We're talking about we get the whole package deal when you engage with the Nefesh Elokis. Right? When you're engaging with the levushim of the Nefesh Bahamis and you're, let's say, just eating food. Let's give an example. So you're eating a cookie. And let's say you said about, let's say you forgot to say bracha or whatever it is. You're just eating it because you have to survive. You're in that operating system of the Nefesh Bahamis. It's not terrible, right? You're not dragging down your neshama. You're not causing it to be besmirched with sin. It just is, right? It's not acknowledging God, but it's neutral. You're in that operating system. As opposed to if you shift into that operating system of the Nefesh Elokis and you're, let's say, learning Torah or you're doing a mitzvah, Hashem gives you his all. You're engaging in Kedusha, which means as soon as you can look away from the shell, you have it. You have all of him. Just that tiny sliver of breaking through, the curtain or the tapestry that's covering you from being able to see God. As soon as you just open it up a sliver, you have all of his light, which is such a beautiful gift. So how do we do that? How do we make this real? How do we make this something that we can actually make a part of our daily living? So the Alter Rebbe right away gets to basics, and he says, let's look at our human experience. Our human experience is our feelings, right? We go about our day, and we're basically constantly fluctuating through all different sorts of feelings. And that's what shapes our experience, right? So we see salmon. I love salmon. Great. I hate salmon. Not good. Right? And then that's how you basically go through your entire day looking at your experiences and what's happening around you and having feelings about it. And that shapes how you feel even more. Now, the Alter Rebbe brings in something a little bit deeper that most people know, which is the concept that your feelings really stem from the intellectual properties. So as we spoke about earlier, your 7 emotive expressions are really birthed, they're considered the children, and they're really birthed by the 3 intellectual expressions. So Chachma, Bina, and Das birth Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod. And what's really important to remember here is that all of the feelings that you have are based on the thoughts that you have. Right? So if I'm in a space of constantly thinking, and we know this all the time, right? If I'm in a positive headspace, then usually my day will be more positive, as opposed to if I'm in a negative headspace or I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, then there's just amazingly all these terrible things that continuously happen because I'm just not in a good space. Or if I'm perceiving another person and I think badly of this other person, then I will constantly see all these really awful things that they do, as opposed to if I see someone in a really positive way, then I'll see really beautiful things show up from them. Okay, crazy story just happened to me literally right before I came here, and I have to share this with you. So I just moved on Sunday, but I didn't move very far from where I had originally been. So I moved 2 blocks away. So this one neighbor who basically lives on my corner, I don't want to say where I live now. He's a Jewish person and he's very grumpy. And the whole neighborhood knows, like, he screams at people, like he struggles. Okay. I don't really know much about him, but he has a dog. And so every time he passes by, I'm always engaging with him and trying to be kind. And when my kids are around, it's like, well, I always reach out. Even if he's like across the street and he's walking, I'll make sure to say hi. Now I moved even closer to him. And just before I came here, I walked out of my front door and I see a bag of tangerines. And it says, welcome to our neighborhood. Love, this man's name and his dog, Charlie. I was like, see how incredible that is? Like other people literally can't stand this person. They hate him and they'll scream at him right back. As opposed to me, who, I mean, Baruch Hashem, he never screamed at me, but I see him in a good light. Whenever we talk, he's a nice person. And so now I see this beautiful gift of him giving me tangerines. And it's just like, isn't that amazing how the way that you see someone is the way that they'll show up for you? It's crazy. So in the same way, your own thoughts about yourself, the thoughts about your world, your thoughts in general are birthing your feelings, so therefore birthing your experience. This is not such a new, concept, even though the Alter Rebbe talks about it, and maybe now all the self-help books talk about it, but the Alter Rebbe spoke about this hundreds of years ago. But what's really important here, and this is a nuance that nobody necessarily talks about, is where are your thoughts coming from? This is an interesting thing. Where are my thoughts coming from? Right? The thoughts are happening again and again, and those thoughts are creating those feelings. Those feelings are creating my experience. Where do they come from? Those thoughts, the Alter Rebbe says here, come from your values. What are my values? My values are basically like deeper thoughts that I have considered things that are important to me. And here the Alter Rebbe gives this example, basically showing the maturation of your values. When you're a child, the things that are really important to you, that make you happy and that make you excited, could seem petty as you get older, right? So let's say the candy or the treats, the child's working so hard towards that candy or treat. As an adult, you don't really want someone to hand you a lollipop because that's not your value. But as a child, that lollipop holds a lot of value. It's important. It has become something of great importance. So therefore, your thoughts are surrounding, how do I make sure that I get that lollipop? And your feelings around it are positive. And then basically it shapes your experience. What's interesting that the Alter Rebbe says here is as we grow and mature, which hopefully we're always doing, right? It's not just like growing out of childhood and then the teenage years. Once you get into your 20s, it doesn't stop. It should always be a maturation of your values. And what's interesting is the Alter Rebbe brings here is if we start looking at those values, we're actually starting to get deeper and closer to the operating systems. Because if we look at our values, we'll start hearing, well, what operating system am I functioning from according to my values, right? So like, let's say my value is eating healthfully, right? Or let's say a great value for me is nature. So which operating system is that coming from? Is it coming from a Nefesh Elokis operating system or a Nefesh Bahamis operating system? Right? Where is that value having established itself inside of you? Where is that coming from? Where is it leading me? Now, a great litmus test is the Nefesh Bahamis very much wants comfort. It wants everything to be safe, and it wants to be comfortable, and it wants it to be easy. And so things that fall into that category usually are a Nefesh Bahamis operating system or value. Right? So if my value is, check for me to come up with an example. If my value is to make sure that I am a kind person, right? Sounds like a very nice thing, right? If I make sure to be kind, this is a value that I have. Sounds very mature, right? Doesn't sound like a lollipop, sounds very mature. Great, now I hear my value. Now, is it coming from my Nefesh Bahamis or is it coming from my Nefesh Elokis? Now that's interesting to start look at. Why do I have that value to be a kind person? Maybe it's because I don't want people to judge me. I want people to like me. I want people to think I'm great. I want people to think I'm special, right? That's a Nefesh Bahamis value, right? Because it's all about me. It's all about my ego. It's all about making sure that I feel safe and comfortable, because if I'm kind, then people will like me, then I'll be popular, then people will give me things. Whatever. Obviously, very simplistic understanding of it, but that's where it's coming from, right? If I'm coming from a space of, I want to be kind, which is a good value, right? This is great, but it's still coming from the Nefesh Bahamas's operating system, as opposed to, I want to be kind because I want to mirror Hashem's kindness, or I want to be kind because I want to recognize the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul in every other human being. That's shifting into a different operating system. Okay, so what is so beautiful here that the Alter Rebbe is really bringing to us is it's a really incredible tool and technique to start thinking more deeply about where are our values, where can we align ourselves and our values to a Nefesh Elokis perspective as opposed to a Nefesh Bahamas perspective. Okay, so what does that look like? Ultimately, truth is a wonderful litmus test, because if we start looking at our values, we'll start seeing that some of them are not aligned with Hashem's truth. And the more we mature, the more we have kind of the courage to look at truth instead of being stuck in, I just want what I want, and I want that lollipop, or I want that house, or I want that bas mitzvah, whatever it is that we deeply want, and realize that those things are not necessarily a truth. And the only real truth is a godly truth, is Kedusha. So what can we do to basically look at our values and see how we can surrender to God? It doesn't mean that we have to do a complete character revamp. But what it means is to, let's say, look at some of the great values that we have and say, hey, how can I take that from a Nefesh Bahamas operating system and instead make it into a godly truth? So show myself how this is really coming from a beautiful space and just change operating systems, right? So let's say I want to be a kind person. I know for myself that I like being a goody-goody. Like I was always a goody-goody. So, but that's not good, right? That's not right. That's not true, because the real truth is a godly reality. So all of it was really very fake, right? It's very covered over. It's all just a shell. It's just klipa. Now, being, let's say, the opposite, right? So someone who is rebellious, who breaks the boundaries, who doesn't go with the status quo, right? You'd think, okay, fine. So maybe that's breaking through the shell, but that's also, right? That's also a person who is just coming from a space of I'm fighting authority. It's all about them being the person who doesn't follow rules. It's still Nefesh Bahamas, right? And they're both exactly the same operating system, right? So according to the Alter Rebbe and according to obviously the truth, it's not good or bad. Being a goody-goody is not good. It's the same shell. It's the same not truth. So where can we take everything that we're doing, whether it's good or not good, whatever it is, and see if we can submit ourselves and surrender ourselves, push the ego aside a little bit to embrace Hashem's reality, the ultimate truth. So I think what would be really cool is if all of us could think about one value that we have and hope, like, even make it a really great value that you have. A value for being a good mother, a value for giving tzedakah, giving charity, a value like being a kind person. What do you say? 10%. Nice. Yeah. A value of giving a little bit more. That's beautiful. Any value that you have. And if you have never really thought about your values, it's a beautiful introduction to start also thinking about your values. Like, what are those values that you're imparting to your child, and giving them as a gift to know what life is all about? And then take that value and see, okay, where is this? Does this value actually stand as truth, as Kedusha, as fully manifesting Hashem's light? Or is that value a little bit tainted by my ego or my desire? Or is it tainted by fear or control? And where can I, instead of getting caught up in the wrongness of that, just surrender it to his Kedusha and open up that curtain a little bit to allow his light to fully envelop that value. I'll give you I don't want to get into. Could you give an example?
Because it's all about me, you understand that you're doing something like, is it really me? What's
You want to give an example?
well, like you said, like kindness, if someone's kind to someone, I think that's the nature, but then it can start to happen. So it might be kind because like all the excuses you gave, like which is kind of doesn't who you are without all the expense.
Right.
So how do you do it that it's really like I mean never shop? Like it's not really.
Right. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I've definitely had this experience where like I tried to do something for someone else and then it wasn't received. Like they didn't go with it. And I was hurt. I was like so upset.
Mm-hmm.
And that for sure is an indicator that like it was all about me, like how good I feel when I do that kindness. My view is like, where is this really coming from? And I think it's an important thing to say in this class. This is a theoretical class, right? We're talking in the realm of theory when it comes to chassidus right here. And afterwards, when you go into your daily life, how do I apply it? It's always important to just do the next right thing. Like whether it's coming from your nefesh habas or nefesh elokis, give that tzedakah, do that kindness. But when you have the freedom and the abundance of time to think about who you are and where some things are coming from, then it's a beautiful thing to just remember God as well in it, because that would be functioning from the nefesh elokis operating system. How to do that? How to remember Hashem in your life.
Like with the example you said, if someone didn't receive well, you may like to go the other way, not take it personally to detach yourself from the situation.
Right. See, here's the thing. It's not detaching, right? So if you approach this chesed, right? So like, let's say I wanted to give someone a gift, right? And they basically said, no, I don't want it. No, thank you. If I was approaching this gift from the space of, I'm doing this because this nefesh elokis, this precious person might want something, and I'm just the keli to give that to this person. It's not like I'm smarter or better or greater than this person that I could give it to them. It's more I'm just a conduit giving this to them, and they say no. Then it's just the reality of, oh, I wasn't the right conduit. Like I'm not the conduit. Somebody else will give it to them, right? So you're very again, you're like surrendered to Hashem's will, so it doesn't become an egotistical thing. So, but that would be like if you were able to approach it from that space. And I don't think it's important to make yourselves crazy and like wondering where is it coming from, right? And if we can introduce that a little bit into our everyday life. Like if I was really batal, like I remember, and I think it's okay to share here because I thought it was tremendous. Maybe I'll share it anonymously. So I was in a school in Israel, and I was working as, I was part of the administration in the school. And in the middle of the year, a different school was going to open up right next to our school and do the exact same thing that we were doing. So we were doing some sort of outreach, and this other school opened up right there to do the same sort of outreach, which basically means that our circles of who we're trying to reach out to will overlap. And in the first moment, it was very distressing for the administration. And I remember sitting down with all of them, and they were kind of like playing with like, what do we do? How do we respond? Should we shut this down? Like give them a rebuttal, whatever it is. And what was so powerful was one of the administrators, after a while, said, if I'm here to service these people who are supposed to be coming closer to Torah and mitzvahs, and I'm supposed to be the conduit for that, then that means that Hashem will provide that for me. Like Hashem will bring that for me. And it also means that Hashem will provide other ways that these people are supposed to get closer to Torah and mitzvahs. It shouldn't be about me. It's about making sure that all of these people come back to Torah and mitzvahs and to Hashem. So I don't have to get worried about my job. I don't have to get worried about the money. I don't have to get worried about the people because the whole purpose is the same. We're doing the same thing, and Hashem's orchestrating this. And I'm a pipeline, just like this person is a pipeline for his purpose. And to me, when I heard that, it was like such an amazing thing that this person was actually living this level of surrender, right? That he was literally a person who he's embodying the fact that I am here to serve a purpose. It's very, very beautiful. Yeah. Any other questions? Or does someone want to share a value that they could think of? Or share a takeaway? Okay, so I think Perek Vav is a very, very powerful Perek because it's here where the Alter Rebbe is starting to really get into how to make this a really human approach towards our everyday lives. Up until now, we've been talking about the Nefesh Elokis and the properties of the Nefesh Elokis. Here, we're finally talking about the Nefesh Bahamas and what does it mean to really start looking at our connection to Hashem and how we can start really seeing Hashem in our lives. What does that practically mean? I'll just share my takeaway. I want to look at a part of my life that is comfortable and cozy and easy, or something that I try to make sure is comfortable, cozy, and easy, and see if perhaps that's coming from the Nefesh Bahamas, and instead see if there is a way to instead bring more of godly light into that reality. I'm trying to think of something, but definitely want to give myself the space to look at that and see where I could instead be a Keli for him instead of just thinking that I have to make sure that I take care of myself. Beautiful. Have a wonderful week. Looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Okay.